Thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today as we start to move beyond data entry and talk about how management and executives can truly engage and utilize a lot of the great features that are part of Pivotal UX. So I first want to talk a little bit about different types of dashboards that can be created inside of Pivotal. And we're going to be talking a lot about dashboards today, but I want to talk about what are the types of dashboards that we can have, and I also want to focus on how we can actually create those, how we can customize them, and what are the key concepts that we want to take away that we can use to actually define a great dashboard inside of Pivotal. And then I want to take a step back and talk about how management and executives typically want to use dashboards and what are some of the key concepts that they look for as well. So let's start by taking a look at some examples of some dashboards. Now, for those of you that were part of some of our earlier sessions, we talked about dashboards in each of those sessions. Our first meeting that we had several weeks ago, we talked about the mobile experience within Pivotal UX. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about how you can use Pivotal UX inside of a desktop environment. And we're going to build off of some of those concepts that we talked about last week as we move into looking beyond just typical data entry and how we can actually maximize information with tools that are already part of Pivotal UX today. So to understand how some of this information is actually viewed, let's look at some dashboard examples. So here's a simple end user dashboard inside of Pivotal UX, and we can take a look at a lot of information. For instance, I can focus on my pipeline. I can take a look at hot leads that we have coming in. I can take a look at current activities that I'm working on today. Different types of elements from a very basic and general sense. And then I can focus on down into different types of key concepts. So if I wanted to focus just on my quarter, you'll notice that I can come over here to the left-hand side of the screen and I can actually select from multiple types of dashboards. And not only can I select from multiple types of dashboards, but I can actually edit these dashboards. So I can actually remove them, I can add them, I can retitle them if I want to add in some different characters, descriptions of how I want to be able to present this information. But the point of having multiple dashboards so that you're not inundated with a lot of information on one screen. Certainly you can operate one dashboard, but it's probably better to spread that information out amongst different types of dashboards, especially if you're crossing different organizations. So if you're in sales, you might want to have a sales-focused dashboard. If I'm working in marketing, I might want to have a marketing-focused dashboard. But even if I'm in sales, I may want to view some marketing data because their campaigns are of interest to me because they generate leads and I want to be able to see what campaigns are actually generating those leads. So there's different ways of being able to view this type of information inside of Pivotal itself. So if I look at different types of dashboards in here, I can actually come out and just select that I want to select a different type of dashboard inside of Pivotal. And so I can break down information and look at my quarter so I can see my forecast amount compared to my quote amount that I have. I can take a look at opportunities that I may have committed for this particular quarter, or just review my pipeline in general. I can come out here as well and look at maybe customer service related information. So I can see our average time to close on our tickets, or I can track our tickets by severity, or see open service tickets if I'm actually a customer service representative. Then I can even focus down on marketing initiatives too. So I can say, all right, here are all of our leads that are coming in per our overarching marketing campaigns. Here's our marketing-driven opportunity value, and even track lead conversion and all kinds of metrics that were actually being displayed in here. And if I wanted to focus one step further, I could go down and take a look at e-marketing initiatives. So we can see campaigns that we've currently launched, e-marketing campaigns that we've scheduled, and we can track our e-marketing email campaign history. So we can see all the emails that were sent, all the links that were clicked, and things that were read. And this is just a brief introduction to the different types of metrics crossing different departments that you might want to be looking at. But let's take a step back and talk about the basic types of information that can be displayed inside of Pivotal. And there's really two basic types. One is a graphic method, so we're actually displaying a graph of information inside of Pivotal. The other is query-based. Now, the graphs are pretty self-explanatory. We can actually see one listed right here. My pipeline is actually being displayed as a graph, and I can actually display a query-based information as well, and we can see that represented here under hot leads, for instance, which is basically just displaying a query of details in the system itself. Now, both of these different types of dashboard elements have very key uses that are available to them. Most people think of graphs as just a way of graphically depicting information on the screen, and that is absolutely true. But for those of you that have sat through other webinars that I've actually conducted, I often think of graphical dashboard elements as a navigational aid, and I love to use them as a navigational aid because it provides me an easy way to categorize my information and be able to break my information down into very usable chunks and then navigate into key pieces of information that are very specific to me. For instance, coming out here and selecting one of my pipeline stages. And if I hover my mouse over the top of the pipeline stage, it will tally the total value for that particular pipeline stage for me. And I can also come down here and just select it. If I'm on a mobile device, I can do a hard press or a double tap on there to do the same thing. And it pops open a mobile window for me that actually allows me to be able to view the details of the information that's pertaining to that specific graph. Now, the reason why that's so important is it's a navigational aid for me. It's driving me to key pieces of information. I can do the same thing down here at the bottom portion of the screen where I start taking a look at opportunity status, where we're breaking out all of our opportunities based on status. And that status, we all have different statuses that we're tracking today, but it could be in progress, could be won, could be on hold. And then I can also come out here and say, okay, I only want to see those opportunities that are currently on hold. I can select that status and it pops open that key piece of information for me, navigating me to the exact answers that I want to be able to view. It's a very quick way to be able to navigate around through information. Now, the query-based dashboard elements are also a favorite of mine because people often hear me talking about using dashboard elements as cues for information. A cue can be extremely useful because it helps to filter out information that isn't necessary for me to be able to view. An example of this right on the screen is actually under what we call hot leads. So hot leads is basically just a classification of a type of lead that we've received. And based on information that we have gathered, could be the product, could be the timing, could be the interest level, many different metrics that we can gather from many different sources, we've determined that this is quote unquote a hot lead. And I've categorized those leads so that they're being displayed in this specific queue. Now you can expand across that process 1,000 times over. And it has absolutely endless possibilities for being able to queue information. Now, we'll take a look at some of those possibilities today, but this is just a primary example of how we can actually queue information in the system so that it's bringing key pieces of data to me and right to my forefront as well. So how do we actually set these dashboards up? How can we access them? How are they actually created? Well, there's two ways that we can actually create dashboard elements today using Pivotal UX and the Pivotal Smart Client. And those two basic ways are, one, through the use of the toolkit itself. So you can actually use the toolkit to create a dashboard element that is then available and accessible to everybody inside of Pivotal. They can also be created through the use of end user personalization. Now, end user personalization means that I can actually create my own dashboard elements. And in Pivotal 6.5.3, we actually allowed users to create their own dashboard elements from within the user interface itself. And within version 6.6, which is the current version that's been out since the beginning of this year, we continue that tradition so that end users still have the ability to actually create and personalize their own dashboards in the system itself. So let's talk a little bit about those two different methodologies for creating dashboard elements. If I come out here into the upper right-hand part of the screen, you'll see a little plus sign there. The little plus sign, if I just select it, there'll be a submenu that pops open for me. Now, that submenu contains two main components. One component is all of the dashboard elements that I have access to based on my security access rights. The second component is the ability to create a new chart. Now that is a end user personalization function, which allows end users to actually create their own dashboard elements from within inside of Pivotal. Very powerful feature, and we'll actually demonstrate how that's accomplished here in a moment. But for the rest of these dashboard elements that are actually being displayed here, those are created in the toolkit. And from within the Pivotal toolkit, you have the ability to define any number of different types of dashboard elements that can be created and reused across people and multiple security profiles in the system itself. That just means that people can share dashboard elements. They have the ability to use them, to place them wherever they need to. As we saw earlier, we can define what those dashboards are and how we can actually populate information inside of those dashboards as well. So let's talk a little bit about how we can actually create dashboard elements. So from within the toolkit, we can actually create a graph very simply and very easily. And I won't go through this entire process in here, but it does allow us to actually come out into the toolkit and create a graph, which is driven by a table and a search inside of Pivotal as well. And so one of the things that I want to focus on here just briefly is what are the key principles for creating dashboards, really? And there are really just a few key principles. Queries, search result lists, the actual graph itself, and just plain data. Those are four key elements to any dashboard element that you want to be able to create. You have to have a query. You need to have a search result list that actually is driving the results. In some cases, you need to create a graph, and the underlying data that you're actually pulling out of Pivotal, those are all going to be representative of what you're going to end up with. So those are all four key attributes here. So we can come out here and we can create a portal graph with inside the toolkit itself that's focused on the lead table, and I can create a graph in the system that takes a look at an X and a Y axis, and I can define how I want this information to be displayed. Do I want to create a column chart? Do I want to create a bar chart? Do I want to create a pie graph? Those are all different types of options. Now, what's interesting is the widgets that you actually create inside of the toolkit itself can be used both inside of Pivotal UX and can be used inside of Pivotal, the smart client itself. So it's kind of a dual purpose mechanism here. And if you've already created dashboard elements for the Pivotal Smart Client, you can reuse those exact same dashboard elements inside of Pivotal UX as well. So for those of you that have created lots of these to begin with, when you start using Pivotal UX in the future, you'll be able to use those same dashboard elements. So it's a very powerful feature to be able to leverage that. So that's taking a look at a graph, but if we take a look at a query, so this is a query of results. Remember I said that search result list is very key, as well as the overarching query that's actually driving this. So if we're taking a look at a simple query that takes a look at the lead table, we can actually create a search, which is going to focus on all leads in the system, and then define a search result list. The search itself, very simple process to actually create that. We can see that the only attribute here is that the SFA lead ID just need be defined, which means that we've created a brand new lead in the system and it has a lead ID that's associated with it. So a simple process for setting that up. The search result list is going to define the results that are actually going to be displayed on the screen, as most of you already know. So we can define what fields we want to display and how we actually order those fields inside the system itself. Now, one key thing, and this came up quite a bit, I had a number of people reach out to me personally after our last webinar wanting to know how you could actually allow users to create new records from within a search result list, specifically when you're inside the UX and you want to create a new lead from a lead-based search result list. And for those of you that don't know, I'm just going to explain this right now because it's very simple. If you go into any search result list inside of Pivotal, all you have to do is check Allow Users to Add Rows down here, and you'll automatically see that plus sign that we saw here in our previous demonstration last week, allowing you to actually create a new record off of that search result list. So this will basically create a new lead when I select that plus sign. And you can do this on any single dashboard element that we actually see in the system itself. So my pipeline would be focused on opportunities. Activities would be focused on meetings if I wanted to create a new meeting from here, or if I wanted to create a new lead directly from here as well. So it's a very simple thing to do, very simple thing to turn on, and you can start taking advantage of that. So let's talk a little bit about end user personalization. So I mentioned briefly that users have the ability to create their own dashboard elements, and that is absolutely true inside of Pivotal 6.6. And the way that that's actually accomplished is coming over here on the right-hand side of the screen. You'll see I click on the little plus sign in the upper right-hand corner, and I can select to create a new chart. If I select to create a new chart, there'll be a modal window that pops open for the user, allowing them to actually create that specific chart itself. And so I'm going to come out here and I'm going to create a new chart, and I have to put a title on that chart to differentiate it from the others. So I'm going to call this current QTR. Now, creating a new chart in the system does require that you have at least some basic knowledge of the data that's contained inside of Pivotal. We have built this interface to keep in mind that most end users probably don't have a deep level or deep understanding of the data that's inside of Pivotal. So we use the simplification method, which is drawing on descriptions of information. And so when we start pulling up table data, we're actually going to be pulling up the table descriptions and not the actual table name itself. Now that makes it a little bit easier, and you can also define your specific descriptions to make it easier for end users to be able to define the information that they're looking for. So I can come out here and I can say I want to look up accounts, activities. Maybe I want to be able to focus on my forecast. That's something that's important to a lot of salespeople. So we want to focus on our forecast. Now I have to choose a graph type. Now I can come out here and choose from any number of different types of graphs in the system itself. I could choose a pie graph, column graph, or maybe a bar graph directly from within here. Maybe I'll just select a bar graph. And now we have to define a category and a series. Now really all we're doing is we're talking about what information do we want to compare, and it's basically your X and Y axis here. So I come out here and I say, okay, what I'm really interested in is tracking by employee, so in this case by me, and I can choose an aggregation of day, month, year, or quarter. But in this case, I'm not going to choose any aggregation. Now I can put a title down here if I want to, but in this case, what I want to do is I want to come out here and I want to choose to do a summarization. So it's going to sum up this particular field of my quota amount. So I'm going to select quota amount as my field. Now, because of 6.5.3, we now have the ability to not only create these, but in 6.6, we added the ability to actually define multiple series. Now, the reason why that's important is I can actually compare one value to another. And so now that is a much improved way of being able to view information. So it's not quite so static inside of Pivotal. Now I can come out here and I can say, okay, I want to be able to also some information about my forecasted amount. So I choose forecast amount, and I'll be able to compare those two numbers together. Now, the most important part of any chart that you're going to create is the search, right? The query that's defining this is really what's going to pull the information and how that information is going to be used and displayed. So these queries that are displaying here are queries that I'm actually pulling from the toolkit itself. And so I can come out here and say, okay, I'm going to choose forecast periods for current user. Now, what that basically means is I'm going to look at the current forecast period, and I'm going to look at the current user, meaning the user that's logged in. So when you create those queries, the user will only be able to view data that has been assigned to them. So I'm not going to be looking at other forecast periods. I'm not going to be looking at anyone else's data. I'm just going to be looking at my information. Not only am I going to be looking at my information, I'm going to be getting a summarization of my quota value compared to my forecast value. And so all I have to do to create this is just hit the check mark here. and the window disappeared, but my graph was created down at the bottom portion of the screen, and this is the result that we actually saw from that. So I'm actually comparing some of my quota amount and comparing that to my forecasted amount inside the system itself. Hovering over these allows me to be able to view that information. Very simple, very easy way to actually be able to create that information and really allow users to personalize the information that's actually being displayed inside of Pivotal itself. If I don't want to see this anymore, all I have to do is hit Settings. I can also delete the item directly from here, but I can also come out to Settings and I can choose to change the dimensions of this. Maybe instead of being taking up 2 rows, I just want to take up 1 row in the system. And so I can kind of change the look and feel of that to make it more aesthetically pleasing inside the system itself, or I can simply delete it off of here. Very simple process. So that's kind of an introduction to what dashboards are and how dashboards can actually be created and how you can actually leverage different types of dashboards inside the system itself. But now I want to actually jump over and start taking a look at some different types of questions. First of all, dashboards can be used to present anything inside of Pivotal. So any data inside of Pivotal can be represented inside of some type of dashboard, whether that's query-based or whether that is graphically based. You're actually creating a graph inside the system. Now, management and executives typically ask questions. They have lots of questions. And dashboards are used to provide the answers to those questions. And this is a very key concept because this is when I talk to lots of customers, this is probably the #1 thing that often gets overlooked. Now, the question is really the toughest part. You can't provide an answer if you don't have a good definition of what the question is. And so you really have to have an understanding before you build any dashboard element is what question do we want an answer to? Pivotal is full of answers. But if I don't have the question defined, the answer that's provided is not going to be very beneficial or useful to me. And that's really where you have to spend most of your time. Creating any of these dashboard elements that we're actually looking at here, the ones we looked at before, that's the easy part. It's coming up with the question. That's the tough part that you really want to be able to focus on and spend most of your time. If you want to have the best, most detailed dashboards that people absolutely love, clearly defining the question is the key step. Coming up with the answer to that question is data that's derived from within Pivotal itself. So what I'd like to do is just take a look at some example questions that typically get asked, and then see how we can best accomplish the answers to those specific questions themselves. And these are questions that I've heard from many different customers, from many different discussions that I've had over the years with lots of people that are using CRM today. And they're very generalized, meaning that they can literally fit to anyone's business model. So for instance, something very simplistic. You might ask the question, I want to see what opportunities everyone is working on right now. I often get asked that. Sometimes people just say, okay, I just want to see what everybody's working on. Seems simple enough. Well, actually, it is a very simple thing to actually create that. And so it's really focused on what we call resource analysis. Really, I want to take a look at all of my resources, all of the people under me, and I want to see what they're working on. So I need to focus and cater that view so I have only those resources that are reporting under me visible. I can do that using a pie graph. Not only that, I want to focus on this quarter. And so that's all based on the query that's actually representing that information. So I can see all of the opportunities based on dollar value that everyone is working on. These are actually based on numbering, and all I have to do is just select those, and I can drill into that information right from here. So it just allows me to actually see who's working on what and who has bandwidth that we can actually start working with and using in the system. Another key concept is, has my team been following up on all of our newly received leads? Now, these might be leads received from a recent marketing campaign. But how am I able to track if everyone's been following up on their leads, or are there any leads that we've just left out? Now, building a query to display all the leads in Pivotal, that's easy. We just looked at an example of that in the toolkit. Just create a query that says all leads. But usually executives and management don't want to see all leads because that's too much. You might have hundreds, even thousands of leads in the system itself. I want a filtered view. My filtered view is I only want to see leads that have slipped through the cracks. So we create a dashboard element that's focused on unassigned leads. Now, these are leads that no one has followed up on, no one has taken ownership of, that are just sitting there idly in the system. And you can create something like this that goes out and tracks a number of key elements. One, the fact that it's not been assigned to anyone, so nobody's working on it, nobody's following up on it. And two, maybe it's sat cold in the system for a specified time period. So leads that are maybe older than 60 days or older than 30 days in the system. Those are two key common metrics that you want to be able to utilize. And that helps us to really focus this view so that we can actually view key pieces of information. So we can see when the lead was received, and the fact that it is unassigned is presented right here in this particular queue for us. So someone in management can look at this and say, okay, I need to assign these leads to people. And if I'm going to assign leads to those people, resource analysis is a good way for me to see who's got bandwidth that can actually take on the workload of following up on a new lead. So these two things actually work together on this particular screen. Another key concept is, what is the current status of all of our opportunities this quarter? But more importantly, I just want to see what's closed, what's on hold, and what's in progress. Very simple thing to actually create that because we're just tracking status. Now, we looked at something similar on a previous dashboard where we're just tracking status of the opportunity. And we all have, in any sales process, we all have some type of status that we associate with a sales initiative, whether that's tracking in progress, whether that's tracking won. We want to be able to differentiate our opportunities based on what stage or what status they're in. And so whatever type of status we're using, we can display that here across all opportunities that are broken down to only those that are tied to this quarter. So I can see what's currently in progress or what's currently won in the system. And again, navigational aid, I can drill down into those right from here to actually view the details from within that screen. Very, very, very powerful stuff. More key questions. Which account rep has the highest total dollar value of opportunities? Actually, it's right down here. And so we can take a look at account manager by opportunity value. And so we can create different types of views. Now, this is just a bar chart that allows me to display all of the people that are assigned to me as account reps, and then being able to look at their total opportunity value. So it's different from what we're actually looking at above, which is just looking at the quantity of opportunities. This is actually looking at the opportunity of value. So the total dollar value of those opportunities that are currently inside of that person's pipeline for this particular quarter. Often a view of information that people want to be able to see. Also, what activities do my team members have coming up in the next 2 weeks? Now, those could be meetings, those could be tasks, those could be any type of information. And we can create queues of views that track out 2 weeks in advance so that we can actually see, okay, what are the upcoming meetings? And not just see them, but if I wanted the details on what this meeting actually is about, I can display those on the dashboard element, or I can just make it very simple to be able to pull that information up and view the details. We looked at this exact same form last week during our desktop version, but you can roll that information up to a managerial view where they can see, okay, not just my activities, but all of the activities that are associated with people on my team. So I can read through this and take a look at the details of that particular meeting and say, okay, yeah, this is something I could absolutely help out on, or I need to know that this is happening or that this has been completed. And so those types of things are all pieces of information that managers want to be able to focus on. Another big one we'll talk about is quotes that need approval before I can head home for the end of the day. And this goes right back to the same concept that we were talking about earlier about creating queues of information. And these queues of information can be focused on tasks that need to be performed today, maybe this week, maybe this month. very key pieces of information. Maybe these are all quotes that I need to approve today. And after I approve them, they will be taken off of this specific list. So using these cues to track activities that I need to perform on a daily basis is an incredibly powerful function that Pivotal does very well, and you guys can absolutely take advantage of that. So here we're looking at quotes that need approval, and we have all the details presented for us right here so that I can make some determinations right from here without actually having to go anywhere else. Gives me the name of the opportunity, decision date, the total, what the list price actually was, what discount, and what the discount percentage is. So maybe we have a process in place internally where our sales reps can actually discount anything 20% or below. But if it's above 20%, you need special managerial approval for why this needs to take place. And so those quotes that require additional approval get parsed out when a approval is required, and they get sent to the manager's queue where the manager can say, okay, I need to approve this quote. Now we can do all kinds of other things with this, such as sending email notifications with this information embedded in them. Some of you have heard me talk about the notification module itself, which can actually be used in conjunction with Pivotal so that I can get the details of this email notified to me via email that there's a quote that needs approval. Or I can operate directly out of my queue here so that I can see, okay, these are the quotes that need to be approved, and here's the process to go ahead and approve them. So I can come out here, I can then open up one of these opportunities in the system itself, and all I have to do is actually go out and go through the approval process. Now, different people have different types of approval processes that they need to go through, but it could be as simple as just coming out to the actual quote itself and choosing that you want to approve the discount after you've reviewed all of the associated information in the system itself. And we get the approval by that specific manager that we're defining inside of Pivotal, and everything is good to go once that process. Once we actually approve it, it then gets removed from the queue because it has actually been approved inside the system itself. I didn't actually save it, so it's not being removed from the queue, but it would be removed from the queue once that actually took place inside the system itself. Very powerful feature set. Let's talk a little bit about forecasting. So we looked at some of the day-to-day business activities of a manager. So we looked at resource analysis, unassigned leads, what is our opportunity status, what are our values of our opportunity. These are all key concepts, but a lot of times they're not easily presented inside of dashboards, and that's really what management and executives are looking for, is just summarize the information for me so it's easy for me to understand either what I need to do, what I need to focus on, or what's the, how is the organization actually doing as a whole. So when we talk about forecasting, we're talking about being able to roll up lots of information. And I've talked to lots of customers that have very good forecast processes in place, other customers that could use some improvement on their forecasting processes. But one thing I've seen across a lot of different customers is the improvement in how we're actually tracking that, presenting that, and displaying information within our forecast as well. The data is there. Capturing data is easy. We all have CRM systems that are filled with data, but we want to be able to represent that data and do it easily. And so Pivotal provides tools to be able to do that. And some of those tools we've actually looked at already. But if I come out here to my top portion of my screen and I just select forecasting, I come out to the forecasting tab, we're presented with a lot of different colors that we actually see on the screen here. And we're using a concept that we talked about earlier, which is that multi-series graph, where I can compare two different values together within the same chart inside of Pivotal itself. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at the ability to really dive into our forecast, and not just the overall forecast, but also being able to break down our forecast into separate forecasts, which is something that a lot of customers want to be able to do today. And so a typical question would be, I want to view all sales reps for Q2 and see how they're tracking against their quota. So we can do that, and this can break across all of our sales reps that are reporting to me inside the system itself, and I can take a look at their forecasted amount and their quota amount and see how they're tracking against both of those numbers, right? So here we are, here's our quota, here's how we're tracking against our forecasted amount inside the system itself. And what you may not know is that you can actually interact with these various graphs and their multiple series. So if I want to focus on one segment, all I have to do is select that specific segment. It will automatically filter out the previous segment for me. And so I can actually change and dynamically alter the view of this information to be able to present it in a different light. It's a really cool feature, actually, to be able to take one little step further in interacting with your information inside of Pivotal itself. Sometimes I just sit here all day and just play with this little feature, watching the numbers flip flop back and forth. So I'm just kidding about that. But it allows us to be able to analyze that key pieces of information very easily. And more importantly, I can now break out my forecasts into separate forecasts. So I may want to take a look at my overall overarching quota analysis for Q2, but maybe I want to break those down into the East team forecast and the West team forecast, so I can see who's tracking against their specific numbers. And so that becomes a very critical thing that you can do inside of Pivotal. So Pivotal in its out-of-the-box form will allow you to track multiple forecasts inside the system itself. So you can have multiple forecasts or team forecasts or forecasts based on different product lines, and then roll all that information up into one overarching forecast inside of Pivotal as well. There's many different ways to be able to do that. It's becoming a very key concept where people want to not only just take a look at their overarching forecast, but to be able to break it down into individual components so they can filter based on product or based on actual forecast team or based on territory is another big thing that people do want to focus on. So this allows us to be able to see which one of our sales reps is way behind target. Here we can take a look at Jules Hannibal, and we can see that Jules' quota is 250,000, but there's only 97,000 that's out there. So these metrics become quite visible when we display information like this. Now we can also take a look at the entire current forecast. This is just a simple bar chart that we were looking at before, but it breaks all of the information out so we can see what our West team forecast is, what our East team forecast is, and then of course the two combined together actually make up the entire Q2 forecast that we're actually displaying in there. We can also use a concept called committed opportunities, which is something that's very big in the industry today, not just necessarily tracking what's in the forecast, but tracking it one step further by saying, I commit this opportunity to this forecast period. And so if we want to differentiate those to be able to track what's committed, you can absolutely do that inside of Pivotal from a forecasting point of view. Now, we've talked a lot about forecasting and what our current forecast is and what people are tracking on and against in the system. And it's a wonderful graphical view for us to be able to analyze this information. But sometimes managers want to answer a very simple question, which is, I want to view recent forecast changes so I can see how the quarter is shaping up. So recent forecast changes would be anything that was recently either added or removed from the forecast. And so the best way to accomplish that is actually to, of course, you could create a graph, but typically what I would do is I would actually create something called track forecast changes, very, very aptly named. But what it's really doing is it's tracking any changes that have occurred to the forecast that you need to be aware of. So if something was on the forecast and it was recently removed from the forecast, and again, that date range is dependent on the query that's actually defined running this widget that we actually see on the screen. We can define the query to say, I only want to see forecast changes that have occurred today, or I want to track forecast changes that have occurred this week or this month. But typically, if you're a manager, you're going to want to focus on things that are probably happened more recently. So maybe tracking forecast changes that have occurred today, or probably more likely something that's happened this week, because I want to know if something has fallen off of my forecast. And so here we get presented with some very key pieces of information telling us the amount, the status is currently on hold, and the removal. So we're just tracking, was it pushed? Did it, meaning it's moving out to the next quarter, or was it removed because there's budgetary issues and it's currently on hold? So you can just tell a lot of information directly from here, but you can also navigate into the opportunity to track more details and more information right from here as well. So another key concept to focus on is, okay, if things have fallen off of the forecast, how can I get people back on track? What can I use inside of Pivotal to help me to kind of make up that specific difference? And so you can use something like opportunity suggestions. Opportunity suggestions are deals that, for whatever reason, went on hold, but there's no, it's kind of an, almost like a limbo, right? So they've gone on hold, but they're not necessarily out of the running per se. So we can track those metrics inside of Pivotal, pull that information out, and place it as what we call an opportunity suggestion, which allows us to say, okay, well, we just had these 4 opportunities fall off of our forecast. What do we have in the system that we could potentially work on to try to fill that specific gap, because we want to be able to replace it with something. So opportunity suggestions just tells us opportunities that are currently on hold that we could potentially, there's no specific reason why this has gone on hold. Maybe we've lost contact with the customer or something along those lines. We should start following up on that. Maybe we can make something happen to get this to close this quarter, to fill in our gap for our recent forecast change that took $138,000 out of our pipeline this particular quarter. In fact, we do have opportunities that almost fit that exact amount that we can start to focus on. So those are different types of questions that people typically ask and answers that you can typically provide. And I think that any manager or executive would love to have their hands on this type of information to make it very easy to use and pull data out of Pivotal. Well, let's talk about another type of sales tool that often gets overlooked, and it's another way for you to be able to analyze and view information inside of your forecast. And so if you come over here to the left-hand side of the screen, you can actually select opportunities, and I can go down to my forecast. And when I select my forecast, the system is automatically going to populate me, the user. In this case, I'm Jay Rush, as the regional account manager for all of these people. We can see who my direct reports are. So I've got 6 employees that directly report to me. And so what this view is designed to do is it's designed to actually filter out content and roll up all of my information about my forecast for this specific quarter. And we can actually take a look at other quarters as well. So I can come out here and I can say, all right, I only want to focus on my East team forecast and refresh the information in the screen. So we're only looking at what's in the East team forecast versus what's in the West team forecast, and review that information in the system as well. Or come back and say, okay, I just want to take a look at everything that's inside the forecast itself. And down below, we can see what's included, what's removed, and I can add and remove and include items directly from here, so it helps me to monitor my forecast. And we talked a little bit about this last week, because as an end user, they'll have access to this same information, but they won't see the direct reports, because the end user, typically the sales user, their information is going to roll up to this view. So you're only going to be focusing on your forecast, whereas this is the managerial view of that specific forecast, where I can come out and say, okay, I only want to track opportunities that we've currently won this quarter. And so I can come out and take a look at that view of information, filtering out based on that specific status in here. And again, this is just a way for me to be able to interact with my forecast, to be able to look at information, view information, and interact with data, and just make it easier. Now, all the information that I'm working with here, choosing to include or exclude data, removing items from the forecast, or updating the forecast information from within this particular view, all gets rolled up into all the reports that we actually looked at earlier. So it just becomes a very helpful and easy way to manage, maintain, and navigate and understand exactly the details of your specific forecast itself inside the system. Now, there's a few other key concepts that I want to focus on, and then we'll open it up to some general questions that anyone might have about any of the topics that we've talked about today. If I go back to my action center, so we've talked about forecasting, but one thing that often gets overlooked is being able to track that forecast and take it to the next level, where we're not talking about forecasting anymore, but we're actually talking about revenue dollars. And if we're actually tracking that information, executives love to look at revenue to see how we're shaping up for that specific quarter right? So now we can track our revenue. What's the actual revenue that we're bringing in? So on a revenue analysis, we're tracking our forecasted amount and actually comparing it to the revenue that's coming in for that specific quarter. So we can see how we're tracking against Q2 here. We can see what we're tracking against in our East team forecast and our West team forecast and how they're actually tracking up. We can also take this one step further and start to say, okay, I want to be able to take a look at and compare revenue from previous quarters to what we're tracking currently in the system. And so we can actually do that as well. So here we're tracking Q3 of 2017 and how we're shaping up, so we can perform that type of analysis directly in here. And we can display this information a number of different ways. If I wanted to come out here and say, okay, instead of being able to view it from that view, I want to be able to view it in a column graph. I'm just trying to select something that would absolutely make sense. If you think that a line graph might be the better justification for revenue, you can certainly do that as well and be able to take a look at this information inside of a line graph to be able to track that. So you can make modifications in how you want to be able to track those metrics and take a look at all of that information. But the key concept is we can not only track current, but what's happened in the past as well, so we can track history in the system. So if we're making and tracking that information, now we can produce a chart that is very useful for management to be able to track revenue, not just for today, but over the last several quarters, and we can go back as far as we want inside the system to be able to make those correlations and make this interface very user-friendly. Now, one last thing that I want to focus on, actually two last things that I want to focus on, is marketing, because marketing often gets talked about quite a bit. And when I talk to a lot of customers, I often end up talking to the marketing department at one point, and marketing usually wants lots of information. They want to be able to track, and rightly so, because they're investing dollars inside of their marketing campaigns. They want to be able to view return on investment. They want to see what leads are coming in based on our campaigns and things of that nature. So it's very important for them to have access to metrics and information. Typical questions that they would ask would be, which marketing campaigns are providing the best results in terms of opportunity value? So we can track all of that information inside of Pivotal. So we can see, okay, for this particular marketing campaign, whether it's, these are very generically named, by the way, upsell campaign, email campaign, announce to prospects. But the idea is that we have different campaigns that we're launching, and those different campaigns are showing different results. And this basically tells us what's the value of the opportunities that are being brought in by that specific campaign. Very useful information to be able to help us to calculate ROI. We can take that one step further and calculate an actual ROI based on opportunities that were closed. But these are just looking at opportunities that were generated based on that specific campaign itself. And another typical thing is not only opportunity value, because they want to track ROI, but just seeing what leads are coming in. What kind of traction are we getting from this specific campaign? Whether it's our social media campaign or whether it's an email targeted leads campaign, we can display that information very easily inside the system to be able to drill down and navigate and see, okay, what's actually being generated. Here are the leads that were actually generated from this specific marketing campaign. And we can actually document that, show that, and present that information inside of Pivotal. Another key metric that people often want to talk about is their converted lead rate. The converted lead rate is basically going to be when a lead comes into the system and we've actually converted that lead into a potential sale. So it's not just a prospect, but it's a real potential sale. And if you want to take that one step further, you can actually say it's a potential sale that we actually won. So you talk about your lead conversion rate, and it could be at multiple stages that you're actually tracking that. Did that lead actually become an opportunity for us? And did that opportunity become an actual sale for us? Now we can start to leverage that type of information so that we can take a look and track our metrics over time for our lead conversion rate. And is it going up? Is it decreasing? Are we exceeding the expectations that we are used to based on the time of year it is? Do we typically see a fall off for our lead conversion rate in February and March? Is that typical or is that not typical? Those are the types of things that we want to be able to focus on. And that's the type of data that can be presented inside of Pivotal itself. Now, one last concept that I wanted to focus on here just briefly was something that I often like to bring up. And I talked about this last week too at the last part of our session because I think it's an important concept. And that concept is that everything that we've looked at today can also be presented on a mobile device. And that becomes very, very profound because it allows us to be able to view information on the go. So every single dashboard element that we looked at, every piece of data that we actually looked at is available to me on my smartphone. And users can define what information they actually want to be able to have viewable on their smartphones. And then they can basically go scroll through it so I can see my East team forecast, my quarter analysis. It's very easy to read, very legible, and the same features apply right on the smartphone that we saw earlier as well. So I just wanted to make sure that I showcase this a little bit today because it's a very key concept to know that I have all of this information available to me at my fingertips right from within my back pocket. And so I always absolutely like to kind of talk about that. Here's our resource analysis. Maybe I want to take a look at all of these other metrics that we're tracking in the system as well. And I can basically go through there and filter those and take a look at my unassigned leads and be able to view all of this information very quickly and very easily right from my smartphone. So it really makes Pivotal a powerful, useful tool that you can access from basically anywhere. And that was the main thing that I really wanted to focus on with this last bit of information that we actually looked at here. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to open it up to any general comments, questions that anyone has about any of the topics that we have today. Before I start taking any questions, the one thing that I really wanted to focus on today was one, to showcase how you can actually create some of this information, but then to kind of go through and talk about what are some of the common questions that people typically ask. And that is always a key concept. And that's one thing that I always want to stress again, is that understanding what the question is can go a long way to defining what the answer is. And if you understand the question, you'll be able to provide a better answer. And with a better answer, managers and executives will get to the information that they need, that they want to see, that can be pulled directly from Pivotal. And you're really maximizing your investment in Pivotal by leveraging all of the efforts that people have gone to populate all of that data inside of Pivotal. And so it's a win-win-win-win for everyone. The last thing that I'll mention is that we had 3 of these sessions. We talked about mobility, the power of Pivotal UX in your back pocket. We talked about the ultimate desktop experience. And now we've actually concluded with beyond data entry, the executive and management experience. All of these sessions are available and have been recorded. So if you were not able to attend any of the other sessions, by all means, feel free to reach out to your account representative, and they will be more than happy to provide the link to you, send you the links that you guys can rewatch these particular sessions. And if anybody has any direct questions about any of the topics that I covered today or any of the previous sessions, do not hesitate to reach out to me or to your account rep, who can then get in contact with me as well. And I'd be happy to kind of dive into any of these concepts or answer any questions that you guys do have. The other thing that I will mention just briefly is we have an Appian CRM conference that is coming up in Dallas, Texas, and it is at the Westin Dallas downtown location, and that is going to be on October 22nd through 24th this year. We had a great time last year. We were in Chicago, and I'm hoping that we are going to have an awesome time this year as well. And I certainly do encourage any and all of you guys to attend that conference. We have a lot of great information. There's a lot of new things that are going to be coming out in Pivotal and some of the future releases that we're going to want to talk about and enjoy sharing those topics with everyone. If you do not know about the conference, this is the first time you're hearing about it, I encourage you to reach out to your account rep, and they'll be more than happy to provide you even more details about the conference and exactly how and when you need to actually sign up to participate in that specific conference as well. That being said, I'll open it up to any general questions that anybody has today as well. I think we have a few questions here. Actually, no questions. All right. So apparently all questions were answered during the session itself, which is perfectly fine by me. But actually, I do encourage you. I know sometimes you can't think of a question when you are attending a session. If you do have any questions that come up after the conclusion of the session, please feel free to reach out to your account representative at Aptian, or to reach out to myself personally if you happen to have my personal email address. I'll be more than happy to answer and address any questions that you guys have. If nobody has any questions, I'll go ahead and give you guys 2 minutes back today, and I certainly do want to thank everyone for attending and appreciate everyone's attendance in these webinars. We will be having future webinars of this caliber on an ongoing basis, continuing in 2018 and into 2019 as well. So be on the lookout for fun and interesting topics of better ways that you can actually leverage and utilize Pivotal. So again, thank you very much for attending today, and I will turn it back over to the moderator.
Okay, thank you all. And again, that CRM conference link is going to be in the chat, so you can open that up and check it out. Please reach out to your account managers if you have any questions. Appreciate it all. Have a good day.